Welcome back to Wealth Mavericks, the podcast where we help doctors unlock the secrets to building generational wealth. And we're continuing our conversation talking to doctors. Today, specifically, we're talking about burnout, leadership, and practice culture. And I know we're dealing with this a lot with a lot of our doctor members. And so I hope today's content will be special and meaningful for you, and that you'll have some practical takeaways to actually implement. Hey doc, start here, right? Core values. If you want to improve your company, your company culture, your practice culture, your leadership ability, and avoid burnout, this is where you start in the process. There's a process to uncover your core values. So I would encourage you never to just adopt somebody else's core values. It should be unique to you as the leader of this organization. And here are a few steps that you can take.
So, these three topics, I think, Joe, is a really good topic for now. And because, like you had mentioned, we work with a lot of members that are in the medical field. And these three things, the reason why we're talking about burnout, leadership, and practice culture is they really are intertwined with each other. And when you look at it, wouldn't you agree that it's more of a between the ears, it's a mental aspect versus a physical, or I'm knowledgeable about doctoring.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's really when you don't, let's look at doctors from the very beginning. We all go to the doctor's office. Usually we go to the front desk. There's a receptionist or somebody who's working the front desk. They may not call them a receptionist. I apologize. Someone's working the front desk. And then you go back, right? They ask you some questions, they take some vitals, and a nurse may come in, ask some same questions, and then all of a sudden you may see your doctor. Right. That's the model of most medical practices. Not once do you feel any kind of warm and fuzzy. Yeah, it really is dependent on the person who's taking you back to to your room, if they're personable or not. If they're personable, they have a culture that allows the people to be themselves, and there may be a lack of stress and more joy in that practice. Would you guys agree when you're in that type of environment?
Yeah, I think this actually comes down to all three of those things together. I think you said it well. They're really intertwined. A lot of the doctors that we work with, like I sometimes will go visit them on site. So I'll go visit their practice. I'll go see what's going on. And you know what they all do? They park their car, and which entrance do you think they take? The front entrance or the back door? They all take the back door. So oftentimes doctors aren't even experiencing their practice the way that an actual patient would. But you know what drives them nuts is when they do go to the front area and they start looking around and they notice, oh, there's trash over here, or this is out of place, or there's boxes here. And so I'd encourage doctors, like, right away, when it comes to leadership within your practice, you need to see yourself as a leader of people. Yes, you're a doctor, but if you own this practice and if you don't own this leadership role, then you better find someone who can fill that role, because you may have a vision for where you want to go, and that's crucial. Like, what do they say? Where there's no vision, the people perish. I think that's very true. But then you've got to have that execution on the backside. So some of what I want to talk about today when it comes to practice culture are your core values. And a lot of people, and I mean, Erin, we've done a lot of this work too. Bob, you and I've done this a ton, is like company values. And if you're to go ask most employees of most companies, can you name one of your core values? They probably can't. Can you name all of them? That almost doesn't exist. And some of it is because, the doctor went to a conference somewhere and someone talked about core values and they put some of it up on the screen and they're like, oh yeah, that sounds really good. And they took notes and they're like, here's our company values. And it never gets readdressed. And so it's very difficult if you have a practice culture that is devoid of those core values, then how do you hold any standard? So when there's trash piling up, or the trash cans are full, or things are out of place, if you don't have a core value that's speaking to excellence, for example, then how are you going to hold people to that standard that they don't even know exists? And so I think that's something that people right away need to understand. When you start with leadership, and practice culture centered around meaningful core values that people are aware of, you begin to reduce the burnout, because then you show up to your practice and you're like, oh, things happen to be working exactly how I want them to be working, but it's not on accident. And I think that's what people need to understand is you've got to take an active role in this.
Yeah.
So say you're running a busy medical practice, you're the doctor, and you're the leader. Once you have established these core values with, your fellow doctors in your practice or your leadership team, how do you best communicate those to your staff on a regular basis? Do you post them in the break room, or do you have meetings, or what's the best way to communicate them on a regular basis?
Well, I'll rewind, and then I really want to answer that question. And I've got something that I think everyone's going to love. It's a really practical tool to take away. Before we get to that, though, there's a process to uncover your core values. So I would encourage you never to just adopt somebody else's core values. It should be unique to you as the leader of this organization. And here are a few steps that you can take this is what we do with our members. Like when we get involved at this level, we do this for you. But analyze your employees that you've worked with before, that you've hired before, or coworkers that you've worked with before, and you recognize things. So just write down the names of the people. That's the first step. Just write down the names of people you're like, this person was impressive to me. You don't even need to analyze yet why they were impressive. Just write down, these are the people who I would love to build my practice with if I could just clone this person, right? So that's step number one, write down those names. Then step two is go through each of those names and write down 3 or 4 or 5 traits that you notice about each of them that made them pop into your mind. So now you're doing a little bit deeper analysis. So that's step number 2. Write that down for everybody. Don't judge it, just do it. Just go through the action of doing it. And then the third step, and this is really powerful and will probably just come to you, is you start circling the things that you see across all of them that are the same. And there will probably be 2 or 3 or 4 core values that just jump off the page. You go, oh, they all share this in common. You guys, we've gone through this because we live by what we teach. So we did this, and it was really amazing to go, I mean, they just jumped off the page to all of us. And so that would be what I would encourage you to do first, is create the core values that mean something to you because you've recognized this in others. Okay, so that's step number 1. Would you guys add anything to that before we go to the really fun practical tool?
No, I think that's important. But what I also think it's important is that I don't know how many physicians will know how to take this step in their practice, right? So this is something that is not unique for them or a skill for them to do. Not that they don't know how to talk to their people, but to sit down and talk about core values. Most medical practices aren't going to do this. But when
I don't think I don't think they need to do it even with anyone else. If you're a doc who owns your practice, maybe you've got some executive staff in place, you could bring them into that conversation. You could play this podcast with them and just say, we're doing this exercise. Did you get what Joe said? I mean, literally use this tool that way, or just do it on your own. You need to feel comfortable. And doc, listen, I understand you. I understand that you went into the business of healing people, and you didn't expect that you're going to have to be a business owner. And now that you're in this role, I'm just telling you, if you want to succeed in this, you have to step into this role. You have to just say, hey, part of the hat that I wear is I'm a physician, I'm healing people, I'm a doctor, I'm a chiropractor, I'm a dentist, whatever your role is, I am that thing. But I'm also a business leader. And I've seen when people make that transition, that jump in their brain to go, here's also who I am, powerful things can happen. So be comfortable stepping into that leadership role. So that's the first practice, is establish what those core values are. And I would encourage you, here's an intermediary step, or maybe even something you do before that, create 2 lists. List number 1 is, what am I tolerating? What am I not that I want to tolerate, it's just, this is what I'm tolerating. So, and this could be, by the way, this extends beyond just your practice. This extends to your personal life, your spiritual, family, business, financial, fitness, all of it. What am I tolerating in my life? And so create that list. This is not a fun process. It usually feels very frustrating, and it's maybe even a little bit cathartic, but it's like, just write down everything, just recognize it, put it on a piece of paper. The second list that you need to create is, I call it your delighted list. What would it be if you were to walk into your office and this, and a series of things, this would delight you? I don't know what that looks like for you. Perhaps it's like the smell of fresh coffee brewing when you step into the office, or it's the trash cans are always empty. When I get in the morning, they're always empty without exception, or the chalkboard is erased. I don't know what it means for you, but ask yourself, what would delight me when I walk into my office to experience? So create these two lists. And again, I always recommend that people have excellence as part of their core values, because that's what I think drives most doctors crazy, is when they walk into their office and they feel frustrated by a lack of excellence, as represented by things out of place, flyers missing, systems that are awry, trash that's overflowing, like that kind of stuff. That's a lack of excellence. And so I do encourage you to highly consider, and I think when you analyze the people that you've liked working with, that's probably one of the things that will jump off the page, is they were very good at what they did. They took pride in that. So that's the first portion of this, to avoid burnout, to increase your practice culture, and for you in strong leadership position. The second is a tool that I want to give you. I've seen this deployed at a lot of different organizations, and this is usually one of the things that we deploy when we're working with our clients, but it's a core value recognition system. Some people love money, like bonuses, like cash, like it just goes a long way for a lot of people. Other people, it's recognition, it's like honors, it's awards, it's words of affirmation, whatever it might be. And so there's a system that you can deploy that you, for each of your core values, let's say you have 4 core values, you'd have 4 different colored 3x5 cards, right? So yellow, blue, pink, purple, I don't know, whatever, pick your 4 colors that represent each value. And literally people can just go grab that from, from the administrator's office. And it's, I want to recognize Erin for this thing that I saw her do that, is committed to our core value of excellence. I saw her proactively go do this, whatever it might be. So it's just like this little, I'm telling on you in a positive way. I'm telling on you for seeing you do that. When people in the office start observing that in one another, they become like these huge badges of honor. They put them up on their doors. They put them up in their office. It's like, look how I emulate that which the company values. And so that's to answer your question specifically, Erin, like, how do you make this known? It should be brought up 100% of like your all staff meetings. You should at least review your core values. It's why you are all there. And then have these recognition tools. Again, the 3x5 card is just such an easy way to do it. 1 color 3x5 card for each of your core values. Have them write the name of the person they're recognizing, why they're recognizing them, and then they sign it at the bottom. And those can be handed to that person's boss, whoever their boss is. So you have this chain of command of this valuable piece of paper recognizing somebody's work, so everyone begins to see that. So a really fun way to see, not just for people to know what the values are, but to recognize that in others and honor each other with that.
I love that. I think for so many, doctors and in all industries, like finding really good people is not easy, and keeping really good people is not easy. And it's sort of a chicken and egg thing. Like, a great culture keeps good people and attracts good people. But if you don't put in the time and effort, to establish that culture, you're not going to be able to attract and keep those good people. So it becomes like a magnet for you to take the time to define what you want your culture to look like, and then hold everyone to those standards.
Right. Well, and there's, there's a book, I think it's a more recent book called Unreasonable Hospitality. And it's kind of it's the journey of a restaurant kind of on its way to like revamping the face of, restauranteering. Started out as like a 2-star restaurant, and then it was like 3-star, 4-star, then Michelin star, all the way up to, I think, three Michelin star restaurant. And the way that this guy talks about how he treats his staff, for example, in ways that are like unreasonable. Like by everyone's standards, like that's not reasonable. Yet the way it pays off in the end is like tremendous. And so I think that's something for us to pay attention to is like, are we paying attention to our staff in the same way that we're paying attention to our patients? If you don't care for your staff, how could you possibly expect them to care for your patients? Right. And yet I talk to so many doctors who are candidly embarrassed when they hear someone say, "Oh, I visited your office," and they're like, "How was it?" You know what I mean? They're like literally afraid of how was that experience. And I think some of this stems back again, doc, I get it. You started in this business to heal people, but you are in the business of being a business owner, and that comes with leadership. And so I think some of that is, and this is where sometimes doctors begin to even resent their practice. And Bob, we've had a whole series talking about burnout in physicians specifically. And it was like by specialty. I mean, it was like anesthesiologists. They tended to be the happiest, I think, if I remember right. But it was kind of like this scale of people and recognizing that burnout is a real thing. But I really honestly, doc, I think that the burnout is a byproduct of not running a business well. You know what? Every freaking business goes through this. Everyone does. I don't know a single business owner who didn't have to crawl through the trenches at some point. And it's like a terrifying experience. It's a harrowing experience. It's one that you just go, I don't even know if I'm going to make it through this. Welcome to the club. You're a business owner.
Yeah.
If you address these things, I think you will reduce your burnout and want to be in practice longer.
Yeah. You're bringing up a few things and the reason why we're talking about these three topics, because they intertwine. It's very difficult, and this is just a business thing. This is not specifically to a physician. It's very difficult a lot of times for us to realize that the employees, the staff of a business are an asset of the business. If you're spending money in investing in an employee, there should be a return like you spend money in anything else. You should have the mindset that if you're working hard to generate a dollar, for whatever reason you're generating that dollar is going to leave your hand. You're going to put it into something that should have value, whether it's family, whether it's healthy food, whether it's exercise or people. And if you're working hard and you're putting dollars into staff, there should be a return of that. They are not an expense line, even though from an accounting perspective, they fall into expense line. The mentality to the leadership, the focus of the culture should be that they are representing the business of the dollars that you're trying to generate by healing people. And their attitude affects your attitude, affects your patient's attitude. It is all intertwined and creates really the same energy. And so I think that's one of the things that really a lot of business owners need to shift their mindset to. They're not. Now, if you feel like they are just an expense line, you're hiring the wrong people. And then that leads to an entirely different episode. Where Joe will go through how you can bring on, how to look for the right people, how to hire the right people to your culture. But you can't know that until, again, know your core values, know your culture. That leads to you being a leader. That will reduce your burnout as a byproduct of these actions.
Right.
And it's just so hard for a lot of times business owners to think that. But the reality is that that your people are a return on the investment in them, period.
Right. Time and money.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing is, as doctors, you're getting paid when you're sitting in front of patients, or when, it's not quite like as cut and dry as like legal field where it's just literal billing hours or billable hours, but it's closer to that than something else. And so it's hard sometimes to continue to make that investment in other staff. It's like, well, time that I'm spending with them, I could be spending over here. I would just encourage you that time, like they need to hear from you. They need to see you. They are feeding off you. They probably bought into this job because of who you are. And so be responsible with that leadership. Take it seriously. Just give some time to them, pour into them. They will love it. They will love you, and they will do so much more. So I feel like the title of this episode should be something like, "Hey doc, start here," right? Core values. If you want to improve your company, your company culture, your practice culture, your leadership ability, and avoid burnout, this is where you start in the process. We really should do some more deep dives, Bob, in what you're talking about, like that mindset shift in each of these. But I hope you're able to walk away from this episode with some practical tools, some tangible items to actually do. Feel free to bring this episode up with your staff if you've got an executive team that can help you with the core values. But don't be shy of doing this. We promise you it's worth the time that you're going to spend doing it.